Hi, everybody. Welcome tonight. Welcome for coming, being with us, joining us. We have a very full agenda tonight. We're starting with three distinguished speakers that I'll introduce in a minute as they discuss the challenges and the opportunities facing us as we struggle with the immigration issues in the city today. And then we're going to be asking you to vote on a resolution. You might have a copy of it. It might have been on your seat. If not, we'll make sure you have one. And then we'll be hearing from our brand new duo of district leaders. And we're going to be hearing from our state committee representatives too. So please stay with us till the very end. If you do, you'll get a biscotti. And how could you resist that offer, right? But to start, first, our two speakers are Ruth Messenger and Candice Braun. Ruth Messenger now is a social justice consultant. You might remember her better. First of all, she's been in politics for 40, maybe more than 40 years, right? More than 40 years. Will be since the 70s. 75. She was a member of the city council. She was former Manhattan borough president. And we were just reminiscing because 40 years ago, we both lived in the same building and went up in the elevator together. And then Candice Braun, who is a colleague of Ruth's, right? And she's an advocate for asylum seekers and the unhoused in New York City. So we are starting hearing from them. And then following them will be Senator John Liu, who has not gotten here yet, but he will. So welcome, both of you. I thank you for being here.
So I'm going to take the prerogative of starting in a minute with some extraneous issues, and then doing some talking about the history of where we are with immigration. And then Candice and I, but particularly Candice, are going to talk to you about the amazing work that's being done in the city of New York by volunteers and not-for-profit organizations, which in our collective viewpoint is not being properly responded to or expanded by the city. So that's the overview of the conversation. So I have two things to say. Actually, I have three things to say before I start. One I thought Lorraine might say, but could we have a round of applause for yesterday's elections? We did really well. If you're not up on every state, I'd be happy to discuss it with you later, but we did really well across the country. The second thing I want to say, I've probably said here before, actually the second and third things I've probably said before, but as somebody who has managed now to spend a good deal of time being a candidate, working on issues, running campaigns, I just want to make a public statement that literally everything I know about organizing I learned from Steve Max. And the other thing I want to say that's not yet about immigration, because we all always, often, sometimes think that all of our work doesn't make a difference. So obviously you know the times that it does, and you know the campaigns that we won yesterday. But I just want you to know that when I took elected office in the city council, so that would be 1976, starting in 77, the area around this hostel building, where's the building, and then there's a pit, and then there's a fence. That area was filled with garbage all the way around this building, 20 feet high. And it was a community effort that decided that it was going to be cleaned out by the community, and it was going to be kept clean by the community. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And every single time I come to 104th Street, I check to be sure that it's still no garbage in the pit. Okay, so now to start the discussion on immigration, I need two volunteers. Judy, you're volunteered. Judy, when did your family come here, from where, and why, to the best of your knowledge? Okay, so your grandparents. Okay, and your grandparents came here, and your parents were born here?
My mother was born, both of my parents were born here.
Okay.
But they're,
Okay, one other volunteer. In the back, all the way in the back. Just have to answer the same question loudly.
my both parents were born in the States, but all of my grandparents are born elsewhere, in Russia, Poland, and in England, and in Russia, Poland, England.
Your parents or your grandparents?
Grandparents.
Okay.
All four.
So this is not uniform, but just most of the people that we know in a fairly large age bracket, those are typical stories. Different countries, different regions, and different reasons. But most of us have grandparents who came here from another country, and parents who were born here. Now, this is not true if you're a Native American, and it is not true if your ancestors were brought here in chains. But for most of the other people, first of all the other people who are not Native American or have a slave history, all of those people are immigrants. And most of us who have stories like the two stories you just heard, and I didn't know Judy's story, I just happened to know Judy, that makes most of us second-generation Americans. And I would really like you, whatever your story is, figure it out. But if your parents were the first generation born here, you are a second-generation American. And I would like to ask, if nothing else, at the end of this work on immigration, that you, whatever you are, first generation, third generation, that you build that into your narrative about yourself, that when people are talking to you and complaining about immigrants, you ask them that story. Because we live in a city, 60% of the population of this city, 60% of the population in this city either are immigrants themselves or children of immigrants. It is those ancestors of ours, metaphorically, they weren't all in New York, but it is those ancestors of ours who built this city. We haven't been here all that long, and we have huge populations who are friends of ours, or used to be friends of ours, who talk about the immigrants as if it was some strange new phenomenon that they are dissociated from and separate from. And so when people complain to you about any aspect of this, just ask them to root themselves in their own history. Because this has been a beacon for people for a long time, and it's a good thing, because it built the city. When I was in elected office, I don't know if this is still true, but it probably is, there were kindergartens in Queens that had 26 children and 25 languages. So, what do you imagine the teaching of that challenge? We'll talk about the schools in a minute. But anyway,
One out of 3 New Yorkers was not born in America.
so we need to get that history, and you need to understand not only that defines who you are, but those are the people who built the city. I have been offering a long time, this is my last extraneous comment, I've been offering private money that I would fund, and so I'm taking it to all of you, any high school or college or graduate school that would assign a group of people, because obviously it's a serious piece of work, to do the research to figure out the immigrant backgrounds of all 535 members of Congress and publish it. Because I think a lot of them would be very surprised for us to discover when and where they came here. One other fact about that, and let's be clear about this, because we both feel this very strongly. The city of New York has an immensely difficult challenge. There are people coming in all the time. Candice will talk to you about who they are and how they arrive. And there are people who were here before, and we have a right to shelter law, and some people in this room probably remember when that law was adopted as a result of a very famous case called Callahan v. Carey by a very brave legal services lawyer, legal aid lawyer. And so the city has to house all those people every night, and it's not easy. However, it is being used too often as a tactic to scare people. If this is happening, and if we have to do this, then you won't have any city services. Then your city services will be cut. This is a challenge. Think about the other challenges that we've had in this city. Storm Sandy, right? A lot of city money had to go to pick up on things that had to be done because it turns out we live in a floodplain. Something to remember when we build tents for immigrants. So it's not like we can't respond and rise to this challenge. We can, and it takes planning on the part of the city, of which there is not nearly enough. But I want to be clear, I think the city has a real challenge. I know, and we are 1,000% ready to tell you that there is more good volunteer response, people wanting to help, people organizing to help, people making changes to help, houses of worship stepping forward and offering themselves as shelter, people running coat drives. There's 1,000 good things going on in this city. Some of it, like is always the case with volunteers, isn't as well organized as it should be. Some of it we're trying to organize, and we'll tell you a little later what our current plan is. But the response of New Yorkers has been basically phenomenal. And it would be better if they knew what the city's plan was, and it would be frankly better if the city knew what the city's plan was. So that is the context. And the one other figure I wanted to offer you is we will continue to have immigrants arriving. The city's estimate right now is 10,000 people a month, which is a large number of people. When some of our ancestors came into Ellis Island, so in about 1930, so about 100 years ago, the number of immigrants arriving in New York was 10,000 a day. Now, yes, the times were different, and yes, you didn't need work permits, and yes, there were places, there were a lot of differences, but this city coped with that because it saw the strength in the immigrants who were arriving and choosing to stay here. And if we did the same thing, we would be lucky in terms of building the future of the city. So that's the historical context I want. I've been working on this issue since August of 2022 when somebody said volunteers are needed to welcome people at the Port Authority. And we've gone through an amazing number of steps and places and locations, being welcomed in some, being thrown out of others, but welcoming people, getting them what they most basically need, and then trying to work with them. And the last thing I'll say, and then Candice will talk, and then we'll tell you how we're going to do this, is, as you know, I'm sure, there was a lot of demand from the mayor and other elected officials for federal money to help with this problem. No question about it. You all know these issues in every area. We need federal money to run this city. We need more federal money to cope with some of the problems. We need federal money to help with housing the immigrants who have a right to shelter. But for whatever reasons, some of them having to do with the fact that we collectively have not gotten the majority in the House of Representatives yet that we'd like to have, this is not an easy issue for the executive branch to get more money on. And Joe Biden moved 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, to declare that Venezuelans, who are the huge percentage of the people coming in right now, had temporary protected status. That is a gift to the city, which the city has not responded to that way. If you have TPS, you are eligible for a application for a work permit. You get a work permit, you can have jobs. And for the first time in my history, and Steve, I would look to you because you've done a lot of labor organizing, but we actually live at a time when we have a huge number of unfilled jobs for people who are willing to take lowest entry jobs in the restaurant industry, in the construction industry, in the home health care and hospital industry. So what the White House did was really a serious gift to the city, which the city is not treating that way. So we are embarked in a campaign to find everybody who's here, who is Venezuelan, who came here before July 31st, who can go through the not easy, as Candice will explain to you, application process with volunteers, with help, with legal services, with CUNY students, and get their work permit applications in, because I have the people who will actually start hiring them. So that's the big picture. This woman does this work 24/7. Oh yes, I was going to read you something. All right. Okay, just listen. America has established for itself a tradition of open-handed generosity in its response to appeals for help that come from beyond its borders. The respect for human rights, the understanding of the dignity of the individual, the reverence for personality, which are part of the American way of looking at life, carry with them deep sympathy with those who suffer, be it from the tragedies of nature's cataclysms or from the brutality of tyrants. As Americans, we have come to realize more poignantly than ever before the glorious advantages of citizenship in this great democracy. And with that realization has come a fuller understanding of what life has come to mean to the people of these other countries who have seen their right to think paralyzed by the regimented propaganda of hate, their right to property disregarded by those who have expropriated the wealth of the country and diverted its use to the production of instruments of war, their right to their own self-development of personality stripped by the enforced subjugation of the individual to the state. That is from a radio address written and delivered on NBC radio by my grandfather in April 1939. So this has been going on for a long time, folks. We've gone through a lot of waves of immigration, a lot of people understanding how we should treat people, and we just need more people to help in that regard and to help us work with the elected officials in this city who are very sympathetic to our point of view.
And thanks for giving me an outline of what I need to say. Thank you for being here. I think that the important thing to remember just in hearing people's stories and talking to people all the time is that everyone does have a story, just like you all spoke about. And I was having a heated discussion with some people last night, and the people who are coming right now are they're escaping horrible things. They're coming from all over the world. So you hear a lot about people coming from South America, Venezuela, and Ecuador, and Colombia. But people are coming every day from as far as China. Lots of people from Mauritania, from Senegal. There's still slave ownership in Mauritania. It's legal. Guinea, just all over the world. Russia, Ukraine. And they're all making their way to the border in Texas. Everyone has a story of why they're coming, how they're getting here. And they're not coming because New York is so fun and they, want to come here. Many of them get to the border and all they think in their heads after they've spent days in detention or they have ankle bracelets on, monitors from ICE, is they need to get as far away from Texas and the border as they possibly can. So when Governor Abbott or a mayor of El Paso says, oh, there's a bus over there and it's going to New York, they're not like, woohoo, They don't know anyone here. It's not like immigration stories of the past where people are coming with their family. They're alone in many cases, or even if it is a small family, they don't have roots here. They don't have an aunt or an uncle or a cousin. And they're just getting on a bus to get the heck away from the border. So they get here, and we meet the buses at Port Authority, but they're coming on buses, they're coming on planes, however they can get here. They get off the bus. Ruth, you've been with me to the bus. They come off the bus often with shorts and plastic flip-flops and some white socks. All of their belongings have been lost along the way or taken from them at the border, including often, and very often, all their documents. So they have nothing. They come with a stapled together sheets of paper from ICE. So they come, and the ones who speak Spanish are really, really lucky because a lot of people in New York speak Spanish. The ones who are from other places in the world have a huge disadvantage. We've even found trying to get services through Language Line in the city, they don't have people who speak African languages, so people can't communicate. It's really, really difficult. So it's trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And then they come and they go to the Roosevelt Hotel to check in. They're assigned a shelter. There's no nuance. So it's very cookie cutter, right? So if you're a single man, you go over there. If you're a single woman, you go over there. If you're a family, you go over there. So if you have any issue, if like people we see at the church regularly, I'll talk about that in a little bit at our welcome at our center. There's a girl with spina bifida who's 7 years old, whose family is carrying her around because they have no stroller or wheelchair, and no one in the shelter thought to say, do you need extra help? Can we get you a wheelchair? She still doesn't have a wheelchair, by the way. So anyway, if you're LGBTQIA and you're scared, if you were raped along the way or assaulted in Texas at the detention center, if you just you name it, anything that's not quote unquote normal is not really addressed. So people come to the welcome centers that we run and that many other people run around the city for help. It's like triage. So right now, so I, like Ruth, started out at Port Authority last August and started working with a group called Artists, Athletes, Activists. And my background, a more recent background, has been in shelter issues for unhoused. And everyone who arrives is, like I said, that doesn't have family for the most part, is unhoused. So we partnered. We were working out of Port Authority, where the city was, where the National Guard was, where DHS was, and we were all kind of working, and Team TLC, NYC, where Ruth was working with, we were all in Port Authority, and everybody knew that after they went to shelter, if there was any issue, they could come back to Port Authority, and we'd all be there to help them. And then in the spring, the city decided that we were causing, I guess, good trouble. We thought it was good trouble by helping people. But the city thought that we were pointing out their flaws, and that upset them. So they asked all the NGOs to leave Port Authority. They closed down the operations there, and they moved to the Roosevelt Hotel as their welcome, or like we call it, the unwelcome center, and no NGOs are allowed inside. So we needed to find a new space. So our organization partnered, very luckily, with this incredible church behind Port Authority. It's called Metro Baptist Church. They're one of 4 progressive Baptist churches in New York City, and one of their ministries partnered with us, and now we're at we're at the church behind Port Authority all day Wednesday and Thursday with many other NGO partners like Lutheran Social Services, Legal Aid, NILAG, lots of different health service providers, all different kinds of people. And we see people every day who are coming with, I don't know, incredible stories, a lot of hope and a lot of sadness. And we try to help them the best that we can. And we welcome volunteers. It's great if you can speak another language. If you can't, that's fine too. Anyone can hold a baby while their parents are filling out forms. And we cook with them in a commercial kitchen. We serve food to everyone who's there that they made from their countries. We help them. If we can't do the TPS applications, we refer out for that kind of legal services help. And we welcome everyone to come. What else was I going to talk about? Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I want to bring you up to date on 2 things. First of all, you live in the best school district in the world. So the Jewish Community Center at 76th Street reached out to the schools in District 3, starting about 4 months ago, and said, like, how many immigrant children do you have, and are you able to provide services for their families? And I want to say, I mean, literally the first phone call I was on, I cried, and I don't cry easily. Every school in this district has immigrant children who basically have been brought there by the city and dumped, in the sense that the schools don't have additional resources. In every one of the schools in District 3, from the principal to teachers to the Parents Association, have sprung into action to try to figure out what those families need. They've done pop-up clothing drives. PS 145 literally asked families, well, what do you need? And they said someplace to do the laundry. So they bought a washer and a dryer. I won't tell you how long it took to get the school construction authority to install the batteries for the, the plug for the, anyway. They have a washer and dryer, and those schools are now all meeting regularly about every 2 weeks. And they were meeting in a Zoom call, but then we were just desperate to meet in person. So now that it seems safer, they're meeting in person. We met with the superintendent of District 3 about 3 weeks ago. It's a massive effort. We spend our time, I spend a lot of my time saying to the city, could you look at this? They could teach you how to replicate this in every district in the city. It would be a huge just organizing of effort that's already there, that's being exerted. It's taking forever. Our plan is, which we have now submitted to the city, is that we believe we could raise private money, and I'm not talking about donor money, although that's fine, but I'm talking about foundation money, basically, to pair every hotel or shelter with either a house of worship or a not-for-profit organization, from the large ones like Lutheran Social Services and HIAS that are already doing work to the small ones like the one that Candice is affiliated with, artists, activists, and athletes in some order. Now it's got a new acronym. But anyway, to make those pairings, we think we will be able to get a commitment of private foundation monies from the foundations that support New York City to fund those partnerships. So they would fund her group to go work in one particular shelter and hotel. The reason for this and the push for this is that if we're in the spaces, if we're in the Roosevelt Hotel, if we're in the Row Hotel with a few volunteers, we will be able to do something that obviously, you can all tell me the city should be able to do tomorrow, but it's not doing. And that is find every person who lives in that shelter who is Venezuelan and whose dates of arrival are known, so that they can be processed faster. All the individual case management, yes, but the major focus would be to process the people who are eligible with temporary protected status and get their applications for working papers in and get their applications processed so that they can get jobs, because you can all figure this out. The city is deluged, doesn't have space, quote unquote. There's always a little space. But they're doing crazy things now, like rebuilding Floyd Bennett Field and going to Randall's Island. If these individuals got jobs, it's all these people want is jobs. And if they got jobs, they would have income. And if they had income, I know the big problems on affordable housing, but you know what? People will do crazy things where they'll move into an apartment together, or they'll find someplace. They want to be out of the shelters. They want to be more permanently established. And right now, last problem, is, as you've seen in the newspapers, the city's idea of how to create more shelter space is not to focus on getting people work authorizations, but to tell them that they have to move. So single adults are being told that they can only stay for 30 days in one place, and families are being told they can only stay for 60 days, and then they will have to reapply. Nobody in this room could possibly make a case for this making any sense. If they have no place to go, it's just it's filling up people at the Roosevelt. It's allowing the city to say, oh my God, yesterday at the Roosevelt, or this week at the Roosevelt, we processed 200 extra people. Of course you process 200 extra people, you're sending them there. It makes no sense.
They want them to leave.
But they believe that it will encourage them to leave, and in fact, last week, they were telling people who applied to reapply for their space to go to a church on the Lower East Side, and when they got to St. Bridget's, they were asked, where would you like to go? We will buy plane tickets for you. Anywhere. Now that's just craziness, folks. It's not organized, it's not thoughtful, it doesn't help families. And the big push that we might very well want to involve Three Parks and other people in very soon is to try to stop the city from moving families with children from one hotel to another, because the kids will lose their schooling, or their parents will have to travel an hour on the subway to get their kids back to the school, and it won't be the same school community if you don't live there. So there's every reason in the world to build on all of these school connections and not move those families. And as of this week and next week, we have 2 meetings with the city, and that's frankly our biggest push. I think we should take questions. Challenges, disagreements. Also, is Aaron here? Okay, so just a shout out to the City Council in general, to the City Council Speaker Office in general and specific, and to the Division of Inside and Oversight, Inspection and Oversight. All of them there. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. My name is Raven Braun. I'm on the board. You were actually the first person I voted for in 1997.
Thank you. You should have voted more often.
I vote in every election, but I was very excited when I heard you were coming. Anyway, my question is about Venezuelan migrants. I was wondering if there was any data on what the motivation for migration to the United States is, and how much of it is climate related versus political related or economic related. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. This is anecdotal. I do read a lot, but I don't remember the exact numbers and the statistics and the reasons. But I talk to Venezuelans every day, and one of them who's 20 years old lives with me, and he's lived with me for a year. He came about a little over a year ago. And
She is adopted immigrant.
fostering. He has parents. But we talk about it all the time, and they have no money. So the government has fallen apart when they stopped getting along with the United States and they stopped being able to sell their oil to many countries. The economy completely collapsed. And so I think that the U.S. made up with Venezuela recently, but it's going to take many years to be able to produce the oil again. And also in the time that they weren't getting along, and there was an embargo, all the engineers and everyone has left Venezuela. So there's not even anyone there to extract the oil to be able to sell it again. So the economy is basically in total shambles. So I'd say 85 to 90% of the people that I talk to, and I've talked to probably hundreds, maybe thousands of Venezuelans, have come because they have this much money. Maybe they're getting, I'm not exaggerating, like $3, $10 a week for work, and diapers are still $25 a pack. They're literally starving, so they're walking through 7 countries to get here. And then there's a smaller percentage of people who have protested against the government in Maduro, and so they are political asylees. Those will get asylum. And when you think about it, the 90% of the people that I talk to from Venezuela will not be eligible for asylum because financial hardship is not a case for asylum. So the TPS status, it's only for 18 months, that will hopefully be extended, is kind of their only ticket to be able to stay here and make money and send it home. And just listening to what Ruth said about how hard it is to get the city to help us process applications, TPS has a limit. So the 18-month clock has already started ticking. So you have to apply for TPS. Then you have to hopefully not get it rejected and have questions and you didn't provide this, or you don't get a fee waiver because your Medicaid card expired, whatever it is, and having to reapply, and then for it to take 6 to 8 months to get it, there's only going to be this much time left on your work authorization. So it's really, I don't know, I feel like people speak pretty negatively about Venezuelans who are coming, and it's really hard because they are starving to death and they can't claim asylum.
I'd like to call out some heroes. So in addition to the city council speaker that's really helping us, in response to your question, I urge you to Google the New York Times articles by Julia Turkowitz. She's an amazing reporter. I hope she gets a Pulitzer Prize out of this. She was assigned this beat. She has twice traveled with a family from Venezuela. She has gone through the Darien Gap, which if you Google it, it says this is one of the most dangerous rainforests in the world. We had a little kid when we were working in the Port Authority, and we were trying to keep children entertained while their parents shopped in our clothing store. One of the volunteers asked a 10-year-old girl whether she had walked through the forest, and she said yes, and he said, "Did you see any animals?" And she said yes, and he said, "What animals did you see?" And she said, "I saw frogs, I saw snakes, and I saw dead bodies." So the resilience of these people to get here through these countries, and when Candice said to you before that they come with only the clothes on their backs and with little money and with no papers, it's not often they set out with all of those things. But they got people who would bus them from one side of Colombia to another through Mexico, and they gave up what money they had and they had things stolen from them. And they've just been determined to get to this country where we're not treating them very well.
Okay. I'm from immigrant family. my parents came here in 1954. They lived in Algeria, and they were kicked out. But that's besides the point, so you know where I'm coming from. We had lots of trouble. My parents had lots of trouble here, and because I'm half Russian, half German, there was a lot of discrimination against those two, communist, Nazi, whatever. So, but I'm a little confused here. What is your real focus? You're all over the place with what you're trying to do, it seems. And have you been on the streets in this neighborhood lately? And I think it was this morning, 100th Street, 97th, in front of the church. There was a line half a block long waiting for food. I had to apply for an aging card, and I was told I had to come back 2 weeks later to get an application. So even for citizens here, it's trouble to get those services. And so I would say, if you had something to do, what would you focus on to actually get something done? Because it doesn't sound like things are like I said, you sound like you're all over the place and don't have a good focus on being successful in doing something.
All right, so first of all, I want to say that I think that the efforts of the volunteers that I'm aware of are unbelievably successful. There are families that are getting set. There are families that are getting a clinic visit that otherwise they couldn't get on their own, that the city should be getting for them. There's no reason in the world. It's a simple issue. Every single person arriving in this city should be given an NYC ID card, and it doesn't mean that it's easy for you to get it. It should be the simplest thing to get, and we should not hassle people. Candice had a client several months ago where the card that he got issued had the wrong middle initial, so his papers didn't jibe with each other. So to protect him, she contacted Immigration Service, Federal Immigration Service, and they said, we'll straighten it out when he comes for his immigration hearing in 2030. I mean, none of this makes any sense. So you're absolutely right that we are talking about efforts all over the map. I would simplify it to this group. There's a huge need for people who are willing to do any kind of services. Okay, there are places that she talked to you about, Metro Baptist Church. We have a colleague, Adama Ba, who some of you may have seen on television, who runs a place out of West Harlem that actually serves both immigrants and residents of that community, just like you, who can't get adequate services, trying to facilitate deliveries of services that should be much easier than they are. But we're trying to get people to get engaged and do that work, and we are totally focused on policy issues at two levels. One is to get the city to structure massively effective services to move people through this system and get them jobs. We actually know it's possible. We're now looking, because the city is clearly not going to ante up the money that it would take to even demonstrate how quickly that could be done. So we are now looking over the next 2 weeks, and we have some good leads from large foundations to give us some money for a pilot program. Look, in Massachusetts, which is not perfect, and it's not the other side of the world, but the governor of Massachusetts appointed a distinguished immigration lawyer, whom I know because I worked with her on Afghanistan. She is now I call her the czar, I'm sure that's not her title. She is now the dean of immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers for the state of Massachusetts. And the first thing she did was to pair every residence with a local NGO. It's like not rocket science. It would make a difference. And then the big issue is, I'm not discussing federal immigration policy today, but the big issue is what Three Parks is all about, which is having better people, all of them Democrats, elected at every level of government, so we could move some of this, not only on a local but on a national level. But some of it I want to say I don't understand. So in the state of New York, not in New York City, in the state of New York, in the fall, the fall is ending, but so 2 months ago, the New York State Farm Bureau had 4,000 apple picking jobs that they couldn't fill. All it would have taken was like a day of work by the governor of the state of New York to figure out which 3 counties have the highest agricultural need, and excuse my language, but sweeten the pot for those county executives to get them to absorb 500 or 1,000 families who would then have jobs, which would have been in the city's interest and the federal government interest. And if you want me to tell you why it didn't happen, I can't. I could just tell you that we are all over the map because we keep pushing with things that seem to us to be obvious solutions on people who I think, this is the last thing I'm going to say, believe that if they're not nice to these people, they will go away. And if they are not nice to these people and offer them a ticket to someplace, they'll take it. And if they are not nice to these people, then I don't know what. It's not going to happen. These are people who came here. This is a logical place to want to be. They can tell that they live in a diverse city that speaks a lot of languages. And they're very busy putting down roots, and we should make it feasible for them to be the next generation of New Yorkers. That's my opinion.
Can I just answer that too? Like why we're all over the place? I think we're all over the place for a few reasons, but one of them is because all of us and all of them, and I hate to say like these people or them, because it's all of us, we're all people. And so we all have many, many different parts of us and many needs and issues. So I worked with the unhoused community before, and I was not focused only on migrants. And there's a big kind of divide now, right, between like the New York unhoused and the migrant community, which is why there's a separate system for migrants right now. And I think that it shouldn't be such a divide. We all have a million parts of us. We are all over the place. We are all over the place. We spend a lot of the time lobbying and I don't know, talking to every government person who will listen to us. And at the same time, we are today, there's a woman who speaks French, and she is traumatized, and she's from Senegal, and she's sitting in the church not knowing what to do because she needs an abortion. So if we can help individuals with individual things, because we're all multi-leveled people with a million different issues, and at the same time try to fight. It's really frustrating what we do all day. It's really hard to make a change in the city. So while we're trying to make those changes, usually unsuccessfully, although sometimes successfully, thanks to City Council, we are helping individuals with their individual things. Like, I can help you get your New York City ID. If I can do something like that for one person in a day, that's meaningful. And at the same time, we're all over the place trying to do other things that are really hard to do. As you all know, it's impossible sometimes. Feels impossible.
Except that observation, we are all over the place. Because
Yeah.
every little thing we do makes a difference. And so far, I'm probably the point person. We can't get the city to do what we want to do.
It's just hard. Jobs is the most important thing, but so is the person who needs the wheelchair, and so is the person who is LGBTQIA and thinks they're going to get the crap beat out of them in their shelter, so they're coming to us crying. Like, it's all important, But jobs is the biggest thing, because it's dignity, it's money, it's food. I mean, that's the most important thing.
So my first local campaign was Ruth Messenger, your campaign. I think 1993, I think you were running for re-election as borough president. So I, like Raven, have...
Thank you.
You're welcome. We won that race. So there's been some movement, I don't know if it's growing or just a small group, that's trying to overturn or challenge the right to shelter law. To the extent that they were or are successful with that, what difference would that make? And maybe sort of broadly, what is the right to shelter law doing in terms of complicating or making the situation, the situation that you are addressing with immigration in New York?
Well, yes. So yes, there is an effort to overturn the law, and there are challenges. And another hero of our efforts, sort of exactly the kind of focus that you would like to have that we don't have. So Josh Goldfein, who is legal. Well, we do that and everything else. But I mean, I want to say legal aid just the city keeps suggesting changes in the law, or not suggesting changes, but doing something like offering people tickets out of town. And whenever they try to move on this, the Legal Aid Society is taking them back to court. And I don't know whether there are compromises that make any sense, but it's not a very pleasant effort. The city has to enforce the law. If the city really wants to change the law, which is what they say, which I'm not personally in favor of, then they need to come up with a plan but legal aid is unlikely to accept anything that they come up with. And certainly right now, again, I'll just say this once more, but I had tried seriously to have a lot of sympathy for the city in this regard, because I was in city government, as all of you know, and a lot of you pay a lot of attention to the city, and it's hard to be hit with hurricanes and storms and floods, and it's harder to be hit with 10,000 new people a month coming in. But it seems to me now that for over a year, the city has been acting almost exclusively, at least the top people in the city, as if there's a fire hose at their face, and not using the huge resources of a fantastic city government, city council speaker's office, controller's office, many people who are working with us, to take a step back and say, okay, what could we do now quietly that would make this look different in 30 days or 180 days or a year? If that planning is going on, which some of the people that we like to work with in the city tell us is going on, we don't see very much evidence of it. And if that was going on, then I think we could get out of this, going to court, back to court, whatever. It's not a pretty picture right now, and you are all people who are engaged in the life of the city. And to be honest, a lot of city resources, all of this costs the city money, but a lot of city resources right now, our tax dollars are being badly spent on this issue.
Also, you can argue, well, we argue it every day, that the 30-day and the 60-day notices are against the law, or they're breaking the right to shelter. And if you think about it, if right to shelter falls apart, then where are the tens of thousands of immigrants who are coming right now, who have this much money, going to sleep when they have no family and nowhere to go? They're going to be all over the street. So every day, almost 24 hours a day, Legal Aid and Coalition for the Homeless, who are the stewards of the right to shelter, are suing all day long. They're fighting for the right to shelter, and I can't imagine that it won't exist for a long time or forever, but you can all imagine what would happen if it wouldn't. And also, even just having the separate HERC system for migrants is really breaking the rules of the right to shelter.
All of these things just compound each other all of the time, which is what we're trying to say. So I'm sure we're pointing out to you all of the pieces of this that are not working properly. But the city asked, in a very good move, about 8 months ago, if there were houses of worship that would be willing to house up to 20 people, and the number was set by some state law, so under 20 was easier to approve than over 20. Were there houses of worship? Now, some of you will remember on the West Side, 50 years ago, churches stepped forward. The challenge came, don't anyone make any noise. The challenge came from Ed Koch, who was like, if everybody's so concerned about the homeless, why don't the houses of worship step forward? And they did. And all over the city, but again, particularly in our neighborhood, there were churches and synagogues, I don't think there were any mosques then, but churches and synagogues that had these crazy systems where they would turn their nursery school into a bedroom at night and then turn it back to the nursery school in the morning, and they recruited people like us to be volunteers. Those same synagogues and many other houses of worship have applied to the city of New York to house up to 20 immigrants. The best number that we have is 200 houses of worship have applied, and the city has managed to certify 2 of them. So it's an endless series of bureaucratic obstacles. I appreciate what you said about how we look. We know how we look. We're working with an amazing array of people, by the way, all colors, backgrounds, races, all of them working in this. When we were working at Port Authority, one of the best volunteers at Port Authority was a homeless man who slept in the subway every night and came in the next day and worked with people. Don't tell me that. So it's crazy, but the point is it doesn't need to be this crazy. And so what we're asking for you is any of you who wants to volunteer in any of these efforts, do. Any of you who can work on being ready to put pressure on the city to do this. And we hope that we will actually, if we get this approval for this not-for-profit pilot, then one of the things we'll need is volunteers to go in and help people do their applications.
I have 2 questions. At the risk of sounding like a simpleton, I'm going to ask this, and as a city person all my life in New York City. Okay, that better? Well, I know sometimes the mics don't cooperate. We're trying. We're trying. I've got to believe we have some of the brightest people in this city, in the country, if not the whole world. Right? And I've got to believe that if a body of people were asked to come together and to create a task force to solve this, we'd see more solutions than we're seeing now. Why doesn't, and this is my simple question, what is getting in the way of that happening? Of having someone lead this in an organized way and pulling all the pieces that you're talking about together?
My very cynical answer is that no, people don't want to fix it. They want people to stop coming here.
So, and I'm just, with an incredible amount of chutzpah, I'm going to say we actually are that body of people. I mean, I've met with the deputy mayor who's in charge of this. I find her extremely cooperative in terms of listening to what we're saying. But yes, but she's part of an administration, and there's lots that I'm not going to know because I've been inside government, and she's not going to say. But those people, you're absolutely right, Lorraine, are available. What we're in the position, which makes us sound a little crazy, of looking for those people and putting those things together. So I was speaking to someone who I can't identify right now a week ago because we thought she could be a little bit helpful with getting some funding to the smaller NGO efforts like the ones that Candice has basically built from the ground up aren't eligible for city funding. I mean, they'd have to go through 2 years. So we went to somebody who's a funder and said, like, could you think possibly about if we gave you a list of some of these small groups, the mosque in the Bronx, which is unbelievable, and whatever, could you think about funding? And she actually said to me, like, I don't know, I thought God was maybe on the phone. Actually, there's us and us and us and us, like 5 big foundations that I know, and we're talking about how we can be helpful. So it's not like, I didn't push them, but it's not like they didn't ever talk to the city or state.
You are some of the people in the city that have the good brains, but I'm thinking of who it is above you.
Right, but the point is they have to, A, want to meet with us, and B, they have to do something more than just meeting with us. So we've come up with this proposal.
But it comes from the top, and if the mayor is telling everyone that...
So the point is that, and that's why the money issue is right now, I'm being honest with you about all my efforts. It's like we went to the city, we said, we think we could solve this. I said to the city at one point, and I meant it, and I wasn't just smoking something. I said, I can guarantee, if you give me 2 months, I can guarantee you 10,000 volunteers of every city in Stripe and every neighborhood in the city. We just have to go out through the houses of worship and other places and recruit them. And that'll be enough people to help enough people. And they were like, oh, could you pay some money? Could you contribute some money? And I'm like, no, we're talking about volunteer effort. But the volunteers would have to get inside the shelters. Guess what? They don't want that. So I want a private funder who I think we can find, and we've talked to the city council about this. And I don't care if it's a pilot of 2 places. I want a private funder to say to the city of New York, because I'm sorry, but you all know this, money talks, and say, we are going to fund artists and athletes for $100,000 for the next 2 years because they're a brand new organization and we're not sure that they're viable. And we're going to fund HIAS, or Lutheran Social Services, for $500,000. And in each case, we're going to pair them with 1 or 2 or 3 hotels. And we have some conditions. So we're drawing up a list of conditions for the city. If you're going to agree that the Row Hotel can be paired with Lutheran Social Services, here are and somebody else, an outside funder, is going to fund Lutheran Social Services to do the work that we know would make a difference. Here's what we require from the city. And the major thing we're going to require from the city is access. Because it doesn't work well, with all due respect to what she's doing 3 days a week, to tell people who may be any place, go to this building, this church on West 40th Street, from wherever. By the way, you know, people don't get free Metro cards, except Candice goes and buys them. Oh, we actually want to tell you a nice story. We took, thanks to Candice, 15 people, families and children, got a free tour last Sunday of the Lower East Side Tenement Museum, which is all about the story of immigrants to New York. Anyway, so things like that, there's lots of people wanting to help and do that work. So the answer is, you know, all of this could happen. But right now, frankly, I'm being quite honest with you, we see the way into this as a pilot with some funding. And yes, you know.
Listen, we thank you for what
She won't say it, but the boss of all these people is a mayor who says horrible things about the immigrants. So the woman that she's talking about who works under him is amazing, and she's wonderful, and in her heart she wants to help. Her boss doesn't feel the same way.
From the top.
It
It's
comes from the top.
The very top.
Yeah.
That's what I figured. There's my answer.
City council, by the way, is
Faye?
separate. They're amazing.
Faye? Wait for the mic, dear. Wait for the mic.
If we want to volunteer, if we have ideas for funding sources, who do we contact? How do we contact? Who, where?
I was going to ask if you could please give us a website or something that, or an email address that the people in the room who want to help could go to.
Right, which is a good. The other thing,
So
I might have
there's
been
a new
mistaken.
list that's just been prepared for there's a collection of synagogues that are meeting on the afternoon of November 19th, which is a Sunday, to do clothing sorting and whatever, and there's a booklet that's being prepared for them, and I'll get you a copy of the PDF, but it gives all of the updated places where people can go. And there are like 1,000 people that we didn't tell you about tonight. This woman, Ilse Fielman, who some of you have met, literally ran a clothing shop inside the Port Authority. As you heard, we got thrown out of the Port Authority. She got a contribution of space from the Seventh-day Adventists, also on 40th Street. And we ran a store there that was like a free store. It was a great place for volunteers to come because it was regular, it was open, you could come and sort clothing, you could bring families in to shop free for what they needed. It was fantastic, and the building flooded, and not our fault, but the building flooded, so the Seventh-day Adventists have to fix the building, so they threw us out. So that's Team TLC. You can go on their website. They now are running pop-ups all over the city, which is much harder, but they're doing that. And if you want something to do right now, if you accept the fact that despite climate change, we actually probably are going to have winter, although it seems a little unlikely every day when you go outside. We desperately need coats. Road of Shalom on West 83rd Street, 83rd between Central Park and Columbus, or St. Paul and St. Andrews on 86th and West End. We will send all of this to you, but look in your closet. You all have more coats than you need. You all know children who have outgrown their clothes. We're going to need a lot of warm clothing because people came with nothing.
Yeah. The JCC is doing a drive for kids now too.
They finished it. They might do another one.
Just finish? Yeah. If you, I'm trying to think of a way to coordinate this because certainly you've gotten all of our attention, and I never knew I didn't know so much. Is how I feel right now. So I thank you both for coming and being so informative. But if you could send me what you need.
I will send you the PDF. It's going to have a QR code so people can be kept up to date. But it also has, I'm just going to tell you, since I wrote the first draft of it, it says learn, which means learn your own immigrant background, educate using some of the facts that I gave you at the beginning, talk to your families, if you would let everybody know all the time that they were immigrants, it would really be helpful. I'm not being funny about that. It's like people have some great story, but they don't share it in a way that's useful. And then it has service opportunities, and then it has advocacy opportunities, and I promise you we will keep updating these. We need all the help we can get.
Well, you know us. You know we're a good group. You know our hearts are in the right place. And when we work on something, we really like to work hard at it to make sure that it gets done, just like you do. So if you could just let me know, and then we will send out e-blast to our membership, letting them know. And please keep in touch. And I think you should come back soon. Okay, Senator Lou is on his way. We expect him within 5 or 10 minutes, so don't go away. But what we're going to do now is Steve Max is going to introduce you to the resolution that he and Lynn Max wrote. It's been approved by our board, and he will tell you why it's so important for you to vote on it tonight. Right, Steve? Now. If you need a copy of it, Lynn Max has copies of the resolution. Thanks, Candice. Thanks, Ruth. Here, there's. You want to use that mic, Steve?
Okay, how many folks here are retired city employees? How many folks are on traditional Medicare? And how many are on Medicare Advantage? And how many people have seen ads on TV all this last month urging you to make a phone call to find out about Medicare Advantage, that maybe you'll get a credit card that you can buy groceries with Medicare Advantage, or maybe it won't cover your doctor anymore, you better make this phone call? How many of you have seen that on TV? Now, the surprising thing about those ads is that all of them are paid for by Medicare, right? Because the Medicare Advantage programs get a set amount of money from Medicare for everybody they enroll, and out of that money comes their profit, their overhead, those ads, and then if there's anything left over, it goes to services for people who need health care. And the fewer services they pay for, the more profit they get to keep, because they get a set amount of money for each person who's enrolled. And that brings us to the problem that we're here to talk about tonight, which is that the city and the Municipal Labor Council have come together and are trying to put 250,000 retired city workers into Medicare Advantage plans, taking them out of traditional Medicare, which of course is not for profit, and putting them into for-profit Medicare Advantage plans, because that will save the city a certain amount of money. That is, the cost that the city has been paying now gets transferred to the National Medicare program. And that's because, as a condition of employment, as a benefit going back many, many decades, city workers like Lynn were, and me, who's on her health plan, were promised that they would have traditional Medicare when they retired. And because traditional Medicare only pays 80% of your health care bills, the city would then pay for Medigap insurance for all retired city workers and their families, immediate families, after they retired. And for that reason, people like Lynn, who was a contract manager for the city and could have made more money in the private sector, stayed with the city her entire career, because of the promise of health care benefits in our stage of life. And that applies to many, to all retired city workers. So what's happening now is that a move is being made to move everybody out of traditional Medicare, and this is happening in cities and states all over the country. Part of the problem is that the AFL-CIO is now imitating AARP by becoming an insurance company, and has its own AFL-CIO Medicare Advantage program that it's trying to move everybody into. And the difficulty with all of this is that it costs Medicare more to have a Medicare Advantage enrollee than a plain Medicare enrollee, because for Medicare Advantage they pay the entire amount plus the profit of the company, and for the Medicare enrollee only 80%. Now, what we're talking about here is a club resolution, and you have copies of it. It's only the top 2 paragraphs of this sheet, the rest of it's background, the stuff in italics. And what we're asking is that the city council and the city generally stop trying to put the 250,000 retirees into Medicare Advantage, and that the city council members vote for a bill that guarantees the option of having traditional Medicare as well as the option of having Medicare Advantage. And the language of that is here. The reason that this is urgent and we're doing it at this meeting is that next week we're going to be a meeting with our council member Abreu, Sean Abreu, who has not taken a position on this. Gail Brewer has. She's been very outspoken. Abreu hasn't, and so we want to have the backing of the club when we go to speak with him. So people have the text in front of you there. Sorry. And Lynn has a comment or two. No? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that the city has actually been trying to do this for 2.5 years, okay? And because retirees feel so strongly about this, okay, the retirees have gathered money under the auspices of an organization, all volunteers, and it has successfully won lawsuits against the city. But the purpose of this intro 1099, which is in the resolution, is to strengthen the city's administrative code, okay? So that always people who are lower paid, okay, will always be offered a choice of medical plans, as was promised to all of us during our employment.
Okay, do we, somebody want to move the resolution?
Do you want to read it? Do you want to read it?
Well, first we have to move the resolution, then we can have the question. You move the resolution. Is there a second? Okay, the question. Get a microphone. Wait.
Is this resolution saying, I know they're saying that, hello? Is this resolution, I know you're saying that.
Try this one. This one's not.
Hello? Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. I know you're saying that this resolution says retirees should have a choice of health care. But if they have a choice, we choose to stay on the traditional Medicare, is this resolution saying the city needs to pay for it like they're paying for it now?
Exactly so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what's in the bill.
Okay, and then for the Medigap, because now, I don't know so much with the other unions, but with the UFT, they reimburse or they are covering the Medigap because we had GHI senior care. Now, if this 1099 bill gets passed, will we then have to pay for our own Medigap, or is the city going to still pay for that?
No, the city pays for the Medigap. What you get reimbursed for, okay, is the cost of traditional Medicare,
Right.
the monthly premium. Okay,
Right.
That's what the UFT is reimbursing. The 20% cost of the 100% medical plan comes from the city.
Right, so will that continue if this new bill passes?
Yes.
Okay.
It gives people a choice. It's not saying they have to do one or the other.
Right.
If Medicare Advantage programs are good for some people,
Right.
it allows them to choose that.
Right.
Because it's always the choice that the city workers wanted.
My confusion was that they claimed they were going to give a choice in the past too, but if you chose to keep the traditional Medicare, then you had to pay, or you had to pay for the Medigap, or whatever, but you know, that wasn't good, whatever it was.
Well, that's exactly right, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, get a microphone over here.
Well, when city workers are being screwed by their unions, quite frankly, and DC 37 told me that I would have to pay the supplemental pieces, that I would have to pay that I would be penalized if I stayed in traditional Medicare. This is an effort to privatize health insurance again. 50% of traditional Medicare people now have gone over to the Medigap program. This is privatization at its worst, when unions should be fighting in Albany for the New York Health Plan and working with them to make universal health care for this state, which it could do if the unions would turn around. But no, they have signed on to this neoliberal bullshit, quite frankly. Pardon me.
We do want to move. John Liu just came in, so we'll take one or two more points on this.
No, I have an opinion. I'm a retired member of a DC 37 local. I found out that after I retired, I was no longer a union member. I was a member of the Retirees Association. And I think the political root of the problem is that since the retirees don't vote for the union leadership makes a brutal calculation that they can change things that won't affect people who will vote for them.
That was one of the points that was brought out in the lawsuit, that the unions really can't bargain for retirees because retirees aren't part of the union, yet they took it on themselves to do it. But that argument helped to win the lawsuit. We've been trying to vote. We're getting there. Yes. Yeah. Well, you have the paper in front of you that you're voting on. Yeah. Is there a motion to come to an immediate vote? Yes. Yes. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All in favor of the resolution, say aye. Aye. Opposed to the resolution? It was almost unanimous. No, no more hands. We're done.
Oh, I know. Hi, Senator. Come on up. Welcome back to Three Parks.
Thank you, Lorraine.
It's been a long time. It's been...
Still ticking, that guy.
He's referring to Alan Flax. It's been 10 years since we saw you here. Right?
I've been back since then. You know, it's been a few years.
No, I mean to our club.
No,
Have you been here since then?
Yes, I try not to miss any of the holiday parties. Oh. You know, the spread here is like amazing. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much.
But I'm glad to come back, even though I did you for some reason. I'm glad to come back. Okay. So, we are glad to have you here today. We're glad to... Hello. We're glad to have you back tonight. I'm going to hand over the mic. You can stand, you can sit, you can stand behind the lectern, whatever you want to do.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. There you go. Thanks so much, Lorraine. And it's great to see everybody at Three Parks. It's amazing. I see a lot of you on the way in, and you haven't changed one bit. I mean, really, you haven't changed one bit. Me, on the other hand, you can see I don't have quite as much on top anymore. I'm referring to hair, not brain cells. Hair here. But it really is. I was just really excited and honored when I got the notice from Lorraine that you wanted me to come by tonight. So I know you've had two great speakers already, and the hour's getting a little late. But I did want to come by and you know, I guess give you a little bit of an update and also help answer any questions you have, because this is a club that always has lots of questions and lots of opinions. And I've always taken that to heart in whatever I do or whatever input I have been able to provide as a legislator and policymaker. I want to thank Steve. He's still working the tech. Let's give him a round of applause, please. And Lynn is still at the table answering my text messages. Like, I'm 12 minutes away. I'm sorry I'm late. And you know what? I am gratified for that, because you know what works should remain. But it has been now, it's hard to believe, it's coming up on 5 years that I've been in the state senate. I served 8 years in the city council, and with 3 parks' strong support, I was elected comptroller of New York City like 2 comptrollers ago in 2009. And with your support, I also ran for mayor in 2013. Didn't quite work out, but you know what? I don't cry over spilled milk. To actually have served in citywide office as comptroller and actually be a candidate for mayor of New York City, I mean, it's like far beyond anything I ever imagined would happen in my lifetime. And so that was always, it was always 3 parks. I mean, you were there. And even when I ran for state senate a few years later, I mean, so many of you took the subway down to the Long Island Railroad to take the train out to, I guess a lot of people would call it the boonies, meaning Queens. Bayside, which is the eastern edge of Queens, to help me go door to door. I mean, I don't actually know what I've done to deserve your support, but I am always honored to have it. And so now 5 years in the state senate, you know, there's a lot that's happening. You know, I think there's always a lot that's happening because it's kind of in our psyche that we want to know what's happening, and we also want to affect the direction that change is heading. So there are a lot of really current issues, you know, but my portfolio in the state senate, and that's kind of like, it's been really a great experience to serve in the state senate. It's a very collegial body, and we kind of each have our own portfolios. It's not something that we're assigned. It's kind of like something we gravitate towards and take charge of. And so my portfolio is generally education, both what's called lower education, meaning everything through high school, and higher education, which is, of course, the universities and graduate schools. And also finance. You know, people think I have a head for finance. It's, you know, I've always said, look, it's not just about the numbers, it's about people. But at the end of the day, there's also, you know, limited resources that need to be provided to take care of the priorities that the people set. And then, of course, some transportation issues. This is kind of like my portfolio. We're dealing with a lot now with the asylum seekers in New York City. I think, you know, honestly, my opinion on that is we're a really big city. And there's been times in the history of New York City where we have welcomed far more people than are coming right now. And it's a big city. You know, there are some problems and short-term fixes that are necessary, but I don't think we should, you know, forget our identity as, I don't think we should forget that lady who still stands in our harbor. And we now have a fiscal cliff that everybody keeps talking about. The federal funding is drying up. You know, we always knew that COVID money would dry up. And so there are some provisions, certainly at the state level, that are in place to try to mitigate some of the downturns in the fiscal status. So Lorraine said, don't talk for more than 5-10 minutes, and then answer as many questions as you can. So I'm going to do as I'm told. It's really, really great to see you, and now I am at your mercy.
Thank you for coming. We had actually, we invited you because we were hoping that you could talk a little bit about how the immigration issue is playing, the migrant issue is playing out in your district. Because we certainly have heard about, I'll say, certain protests in your district. So, what, you know, tell us what's going on, and I'd be particularly interested in terms of how you're viewing this as a potential political problematic issue for Democrats.
Okay, so first of all, the only reason that things are problematic for Democrats is because the Republicans continue to wage a fear-mongering battle on all fronts. They did so with bail reform. They're now doing it with, they did so with the increase in crime, and they're now using the extreme xenophobia, in my opinion, to divide people. And so that's what we have to be mindful of. I encourage my fellow Democrats not to fall into that trap, and that, you know what, at the end of the day, we are still Democrats. We all understand that we have a short-term problem. A lot of it is driven by these southern governors who are using this as a political issue in their hometowns and in their home states to try to bolster their own re-election chances in the aftermath of their failed policies. So we're dealing with that here in New York City, other major cities too, but in New York City, much more so than other places. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't confront some of the problems here. So, I said this to the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. I don't think people are against immigration per se, because I represent some areas of New York City that really are not friendly to immigrants, and I haven't heard a peep from them, because there is no 1,000-person or 2,000-person camp that's been set in that neighborhood. And I represent some pretty immigrant areas where there is a 1,000-person camp being set up at Creedmoor, and there are a lot of people up in arms. So for me, honestly, I don't think it's an immigration issue per se. It's really more of an extension, or the issue of people not wanting a homeless shelter like on their block or even within their vicinity. And a homeless shelter is like maybe 100 people, at max 200 people. We now have this camp that's 1,000 people. And so, people are rightfully concerned about that. And they raise issues like, well, how are we going to actually take care of these people? What kind of transportation access do they have? People complain that, I have many South Asians in that area. They leave their shoes outside the door, and they've complained about some of their shoes being stolen. But, a lot of them have responded that these people probably need the shoes more than they do. And so I feel heartened by yesterday's election results, where they were thinking that Republicans were going to sweep much of the city, or not much of the city, but a lot more of the city than they had in past years. Turned out not to be true. Turned out to be a lot of hype. Democrats won very strongly in southern Brooklyn, in the new Asian district, where they were thinking, there's all this talk about Asians becoming more Republicans. Honestly, that's just a lot of New York Post nonsense. And I mean, it's just not true. And then Justin Brannan beating out Ari Kagan in that district, where you had a Republican and Democrat running against each other, both incumbent members of the city council. We have in Eastern Queens, we had a couple of Asian members who were thought to be vulnerable, but they won handily. And so I'm heartened by the results. The only one that I'm a little disappointed about is the one in the Bronx. I think yesterday's results are very encouraging, and they remind us not to give in to short-term, battle cries, particularly from Republicans, and stay true to the values that we have as Democrats. Yes, and I should say thank you all. Thank you to our district leaders. Good to see you, Dan, Teresa. You know how much I love you. Congratulations on being district leaders, and I'm no longer controller, so I can't double your pay anymore. But if I was, I would.
Step back.
Okay. I used to double. Oh, and I'm terribly sorry, but I can't believe I forgot to take a moment of silence. I think you've already taken many moments of silence, but yes, Cynthia Doty was a dear friend. She was a leader for this club, and not just this club, a leader all around for so long. And I was just shocked and floored when I heard the news. And then I didn't even know that a service had taken place, so I missed it. And but I want to just at least acknowledge her presence still with us. So thank you, Cynthia. We love you. And thank you to our new district leader, Teresa, who's stepping into very big shoes, but she has very large feet also. Figuratively, Teresa. Yes, Dan.
Thank you. And also to club members, as well as you, Senator, if you wish to see the service, it was recorded, and a link is on our website for all of you to review at your leisure. Senator, as the parent, I'm a parent of a middle schooler who's now in 6th grade, and the recent law that was passed to limit class size to 25 children generally seems like an excellent step forward. I was just reading in the paper that we're going to need to build another 800 schools, and I just wanted to know if, where that's going, resources are going to come from to be able to undertake that, considering that it seems like it costs $1 trillion to build a single school. I just want to know where we're going to get $1 trillion to fulfill that need. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Dan. And I thought we were on first name basis for the last 20 years, so suddenly you're being all formal with the titles. I don't know what's happening here. You guys, please just call me John, as you always have. Dan brings up the class size issue, and that is actually my biggest priority in the Senate. When I ran for state Senate, my main goal was to fully fund the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which many of you will remember was a parent-driven lawsuit that started in the early 1990s. And it took a decade for it to wind up through the courts, and that was a case where parents sued that their kids, New York City school kids, were not getting a sound basic education as guaranteed by the New York State Constitution. And after many years of the litigation, a decade's worth of litigation, my colleague Robert Jackson being one of the parent plaintiffs at the time, the courts decided in favor of the plaintiffs and ruled that New York State was in fact not providing a sound basic education for every school kid, particularly in New York City. The case was based in New York City at first and then extended to the entire state. The lower court ruled that, it was appealed, and then the highest court, which in New York State is not the Supreme Court, it's the Court of Appeals, they also affirmed that decision. So basically, the courts decided that New York State was in violation of the state constitution. At which point, we set up a funding formula called foundation aid that then determines how much each school district needs to get in order to provide a sound basic education. Now, fast forward 20 years, when I was running for the state senate, I was bemoaning the fact that the state had never fully funded that foundation aid. It was $4 billion every year short. And so I got elected, and that was my top priority. I wasn't able to do it the first couple of years, but by year 2, we set in place a plan to fully fund foundation aid annually, phasing that in over 3 years. And we have now, this year, for the first time, fully funded foundation aid. Now, what is that foundation aid for? It's to provide a sound basic education. What is sound basic education? What does that mean? Well, I think I know what a sound basic education is. I think most parents know what a sound basic education is. Even the DOE has their definition of sound basic education, but it's really the definition that was promulgated by the court decision that matters the most. And that court decision cited the overcrowded classrooms in New York City as one of the major factors why they ruled that kids were not getting a sound basic education. So that foundation aid is meant to provide that sound basic education, which includes not having excessively large class sizes. And so Dan mentioned that the class size limitations that have now been legislated and is New York State law says that kindergarten through 3rd grade classes cannot exceed 20 students, 20 kids. 4th through 8th grade students, 4th through 8th grade classes cannot exceed 23 students in the classroom. And high school classes cannot have more than 25 students. And that is the goal. Now, the Adams administration has hemmed and hawed about this and called it an unfunded mandate. all the while accepting the increases, the significant increases in foundation aid that the state's been delivering over the last couple of years and will continue to do so in perpetuity. In fact, school aid in the state budget for New York City has increased by more than $1 billion annually since Eric Adams took office. So when he says there is not enough money, my response right away is, well, you know what? There is enough money, and not only that, this was not your fault. It was actually the doing of Michael Bloomberg and then Bill de Blasio, but you're now the mayor, and you're supposed to get stuff done. Finally, because that's what the state constitution requires, and that is now what we're providing you funding for, school funding. So it's gonna, you know, it's a little bit of performing oral surgery on City Hall and the Department of Education, but I'm confident we're going to get there. It's not going to be overnight. They have 5 years to phase this in. But I think at the end of the day, well, let's put it this way. You know, I understand that there are some parents who are concerned that some special classes or AP classes may be limited, and that is possibly true in the short term. And, you know, those are things that we need to consider in the implementation. But I have absolutely no doubt that 10 years from now, nobody's ever going to go look back at this and say reducing class sizes was the wrong thing to do. So it's the right thing to do. And then one last note. If the Department of Education wants to come back, and by the way, where did I get those numbers? The limitations of 20, 23, and 25? I didn't pull those numbers out of, those are not my numbers. Those numbers are from the Department of Education themselves. Back in 2007, when they were explaining how much money it would cost to provide a sound basic education and the cost of reducing class sizes to those thresholds that they themselves specified were the right levels, 20, 23, and 25. And now that we've provided all that money, based on their own formulas, they're saying there's not enough money. And my response is, if you think that your original numbers, 20, 23, and 25, are too low, then tell us what you think the numbers really should be. Maybe it doesn't have to go all the way down to 20 kids. Maybe 22 kids or 24 kids. And high school classes don't have to go down to 25, maybe 28, maybe even 30, because right now it's 34. Whatever the number is, tell us what it is. But then we're going to have to adjust the foundation aid formula to reflect a higher class size, thereby necessitating less state funding. So, like, the city wants to have their cake and eat it too. I'd rather the kids have their cake and eat it too. And let's dispense with the politics here. Yes. John, please.
Hello?
It might be the battery, yes.
There we go, thank you. I really appreciate all that you've done in education for years. You are really a strong advocate for our kids and for us teachers. This class size, it's a law now, and they have 5 years to mandate it, and we're in year 1. And I have a classroom of 31 students. I'm a middle school social studies teacher. I have an asylum-seeking student in that classroom. I have students with disabilities in that classroom. It is tiny, and there is one of me. I, this afternoon, tried to have conferences with each student so that I could give them proper feedback, which I know that they need. I reached 8 of them, and I have a list tomorrow morning that I'm going to try to tackle, and I'll probably reach 8 to 10 more. And then the reality is they have to hand in these assignments. And the point here is 31 students in a classroom, and the limit is 32, is so difficult. And this class size law was meant to tackle that, right? It was meant to tackle that exactly, and you've been advocating for it. But I work in District 2, and I'm a teacher, but I'm also a step-parent, and my husband Sung and I have our oldest at STI. We are so thrilled that he's at STI. But we have a contingent of parents within our district of other parents within our child's school who are adamant that this law should now be changed because there would be less spots at the STIs, at the specialized high schools of this city. And the reality is that as a teacher, knowing the impact that having such a large class size has on these students, I would rather that our student, if he didn't get that spot at STI because there were less of them, so be it, honestly. I am really frustrated by this contingent of people in District 2 specifically who are saying our district deserves to have a modification to a law because they are worried about G&T spots. And it's been a real controversial issue recently, but I'm really growing disillusioned with what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to speak up more in having that teacher and step-parent place in all of this. But it's been a real source of frustration recently, and I'm wondering what your insight is, because I know you have so much insight into education.
Well, let's step back and imagine 10 years from now when the class size limitations are in. Even at a school like Stuyvesant High School, those kids will learn even better when teachers are not dealing with 34 kids in each class. I don't think there's any dispute about that. The only frustration is in the transition. And in the transition, as the class sizes are reduced, it is possible that some schools will have fewer seats because they're overcrowded to begin with. The way to reduce overcrowding is not to have the continued overcrowding. I mean, it's as simple as that. But in the short term, there are parents who are concerned that there will be fewer seats to go around. And that's something that we have to address through additional school construction. And that is what the $1.6 billion annually, every year, in additional state aid going to New York City specifically is meant to provide. The IBO says it's going to cost $1.8 billion a year. Mayor Adams himself has said it's going to cost about $1 to $1.5 billion a year. We're already providing $1.6 billion a year more to New York City than just a few years ago. And enrollment is down. So the city's been cutting money from individual schools, whereas we've been continuing to increase state aid. So there's some three-card Monte going around with the money. It cannot affect our schools. We're providing that funding. And so, it's not going to be easy. There are going to be some principals who are worried about their own school enrollments having to go down because of the class size limitations. There are concerns in neighborhoods about where new schools would be sited. And so it's not going to be easy. This is a major transition, but it's a transition that must be done. And we're going to just have to overcome the hurdles. And that is on the city of New York to make sure that happens. This mayor still wants mayoral control, which, by the way, is a big issue coming up in the new legislative session in 2024. You want control? You got to own it. And things that need to be improved and things that need to be done simply to bring New York City into compliance with the state constitution that requires a sound basic education, which is precluded if classes remain overcrowded. It's your job. And now that we've given you the money, there's no more excuses.
Senator, it is so good to have good friends back. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so, so much. I'm going to take your mic
Can I get it?
and just keep the good work going.
Can I get invited to the holiday party?
You know what? You're hearing it here for the first time, January 21st.
Jan?
Here, holiday party.
Excellent.
Sunday. Thank you for asking. I forgot all about it until you mentioned it. Have a good night, Senator. Thanks for coming. If you'd like to hear our dynamic duo of district leaders, please stay, because I think they are appearing together on stage for the first time as our joint district leaders, right?
Yes.
One for each of you.
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks again, Senator.
John is going to be a real hard act to follow here.
Indeed. So.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to talk about the election because I've spent the last week and a half working on starting with early voting, monitoring the elections, which is what I do with my partner of another party for the BOE. And the election turnout was pathetic. Very low. We know it's an off year, so it was expected to be low, but I have a few numbers. In Manhattan, we had 25,540 voters for early voting, and we have 29 sites. That's averaging less than 1,000 per site, over 9 days. The total for the 5 boroughs was 86,000. Now, I read today that the total is 313,000, including Election Day. That's for New York City, okay? And this is out of a normal 4.6 million active voters in the city. 313,000 came out. So this is something we really need to do something about. People are not taking elections seriously. I mean, they will come out next year. We know it's going to be busy for presidential, but this was not good.
Our new district leader, ladies and gentlemen, Teresa Cantor. So Senator Lou made reference to the fact that we had a loss in the Bronx. Where else in New York State did we have a loss? You're disqualified because you know too much. Long Island. Yes, you're correct. Where is the state chair of New York State Democratic Party from? Long Island. Wow. He is now batting 1,000 in terms of being able to maintain and extend his reign in elected officials. We lost the Suffolk County executive race, which is unfortunate. Now, we can't pin it all on Jay Jacobs, but it seems to be a regular pattern. That is, his tenure has led to significant losses. Perhaps Long Island in that particular race may have been idiosyncratic, but it's part of a larger pattern. And since we have 4 congressional seats in Long Island that are currently held by Republicans, it would certainly be nice if we had a better working Democratic Party. The state party is meeting next week in Long Island to talk about a variety of things, but one of them is resolutions to actually have better organization. It's being developed by local state committee members, a ground-up proposal, and the state party is profoundly against it. So that is something to look forward to, is a state party that is almost fighting itself to try and organize itself. We're going to have to work around them, as we always do. Next year is a presidential election year, and next year we're going to have a campaign storefront, which for those of you, which this is a little bit new, we had one 8 years ago prior to the, yes, indeed, we should. Thank you, Deborah. We had one 8 years ago during the last presidential election cycle. We had to take a break because of the pandemic. We actually rent a physical place usually on Broadway, and we have campaign activities throughout the whole year. So we look forward to that getting started. And then in terms of, so that's the state committee, and then in terms of district leader, since I temporarily wear these 2 hats, for district leader, we actually had a county meeting just last week, was it? November the 1st, thank you. And we've constituted an ethics committee. I was reluctantly drafted to serve on it, and then I was further reluctantly drafted to chair it. But the ethics committee was meeting because of some shenanigans at the county meeting, which many of you who attended might have witnessed, where in the 72nd Assembly District, which is our colleagues up to the north, miraculously some votes didn't appear. There was 2 different sides, and some votes just sort of like just disappeared. They weren't counted until some people got very noisy and objected, and then they had a roll call, and those votes were then properly counted. So someone raised an ethics complaint, and so there has to be a duly formed ethics committee, which again I have reluctantly agreed to serve on, to try and adjudicate it. We had a meeting to talk about the ethics committee, and then we talked about the ethics of the ethics committee, and we then tabled the discussion until next month. I look forward to that enlightening discussion. I will keep you duly updated. That's the district leader, and I think that is state committee. Did I miss anything? I think that's it. We are delighted to have you all here tonight. Just want to get a quick show of hands. How many of you got a postcard in the mail? That's good. Oh, good. Okay. All right, we're making progress. We're making progress. We are trying this out to see if we can sort of encourage people to see, with the postcards to remind them of the meeting, and hopefully that encourages people to come and show up. So that and the biscotti. So I think I'll bring my report to a close. Are there any questions either about the state committee or the district leader for either me or Teresa? Hearing none, I turn the floor back over to our illustrious president, Lorraine Zamora.
Excellent job. Okay, it is 10 to 10. Sorry about that, folks. I told you we had a busy meeting tonight. Anyway, I wish you all a happy, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you share it with friends and family. And we'll see you next month. And you'll also be hearing about our holiday party. I just have to get that date confirmed with the hostel, but we're hoping it's going to be Sunday, January 21st. So, our first in-person holiday party in a few years. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.